You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Matt Adams, I'm Dave Griffiths. Appreciate you joining us with 1 week to go before game week for the Colts in the 2024 NFL regular season. Still plenty to discuss this week as the Colts make their final preparation steps forward, what have you, before that game week, and specifically focusing in on one opponent. So that's really our focus as well of this week as the team whittles down to 53 men on the roster. Then, of course, the plethora of practice squad players, a number that seems to keep going up year after year, which is a good thing for players. And then Chris Ballard stepping up to the microphone as the Colts get set for their season. And some different tidbits that we'll work in here and there as well, including team captains revealed just this week with 1 week to go, as I said.
A franchise record with number of team captains.
Matt and I were just discussing that
like
before
8.
you popped your head in.
Seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Seems like, because it is a lot.
It is. It's like 1/5 of the team or 1/6 of the team is how many captains you have there. So congratulations to all the massive leaders on this team. And I don't say that completely tongue-in-cheek, but maybe a little tongue-in-cheek to have 8 guys out there. My goodness.
What's funny, that the addition is Michael Pittman.
Right.
And at least twice in the last, 6 months, Reggie Wayne has mentioned, what's the next step on Michael Pittman's career? It would be nice to get a C on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened. I'm wondering if Reggie stood outside the team room as they were meeting and passed out $100 bills.
Yeah.
with Michael Pittman's face
Vote
on.
for Pitt.
Vote for Pitt.
I would not put that past him.
Oh, neither would I. Neither would I. And Pitt was good about it. Somebody said, well, does this mean you're more mature and all this? And he said, I don't think too many people in this room call me mature. So, but Reggie's point is, if you're making the money he's making, doggone it, be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Pitt is a rah-rah leader like some guys. I think Zaire probably is. Ryan Kelly. It's more, this is how we do things. Ryan Kelly would be, this is how we do it.
Right.
So, yeah. But it's a good thing for Pitt. I'm just wondering if there's any lobbying in the background to get that done.
Right. Yeah. Zaire is the rally the troops leader. Get everybody riled up.
And I've seen Buck break down the team before games too. He can get rather
for sure
vociferous.
He can too. And him and Kelly being the guys that are follow our example leaders. Anthony Richardson, the quarterback leader. Not I wouldn't call him the most vocal young man either at this point, but nevertheless, being the quarterback of the team kind of just gives you that position of a leadership
and he
role.
got it as a rookie.
Exactly.
Before he ever played a game.
Right. So he's there. And then Jonathan Taylor, he was captain previously in 2022, but was not elected captain last year for reasons that should be obvious.
We could go over him again, but let's not do that.
Let's not.
We don't need to. And he's back as a captain yet again this year. And then, of course, Kenny Moore, who's been here for a long time as well. And Quentin Nelson, because he would pancake you if you didn't elect him a captain. So they're your 8. DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin, Kenny Moore, Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman Jr., and Jonathan Taylor. Bingo, bango, bongo. Quick notes from Colts practice today before we dive into Chris Ballard's comments. Juju Brent's in a no-contact jersey, but sounded optimistic in the locker room, chap, that he was going to play this coming weekend because he broke his nose because of a freak foot that flew under his face mask in that preseason game.
He got cleated.
Ouch.
Because he said that when he finished the series and he came off and he looked in a mirror and his nose was pointing to the side. So he figured it was broken, had a CT scan. Yeah, it's just a freak thing to where I even being told how it happened, how someone can get a complete cleat into your face mask, under your helmet, to your nose.
Right.
It's amazing. And it just shows you that you can control a lot of things in football, and some things are just totally out of your control.
Just the right angle or just the wrong angle, as the case may be. Dallas Flowers is dealing with a hamstring injury, but also allegedly will be ready to go in week 1 as well. So not too many injuries of note, but of course the big one will be Josh Downs that we're paying attention to over the next 10 days. Still, of course, has not returned to practice from his preseason injury. That's the big one, Chap, over the next 10, 11 days or so.
They keep being coy about it, which is what you do. Chris Ballard said, we'll see. He sounded optimistic, but you're not going to rule a guy out.
Right.
You keep the other team guessing. We just think that week one is a bridge too far with this injury, but we don't know. They've got the highest tech rehab, mechanisms and all that. What you don't want is to say, yeah, he's pretty good. And all of a sudden he goes out there and he continues. All of a sudden it's 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with it.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But the difference is the difference he makes is pretty enormous on this offense. What he brings, and that's not to downplay whoever takes his place, whether it's Mitchell or even Granson or moving Pitt inside. It's just this is what this guy does.
Yeah, I will downplay anybody else personally who takes his spot. I mean, Josh Downs has been here for a whole year. He had nearly 70 catches as a rookie. If you're looking, good job there, Chap. You tried to be quiet.
And the more you try to be quiet, opening up a Sprite, not a beer.
This week's Blue Zone Podcast brought to you by Sprite.
Exactly.
So the more you try to be quiet, so I just
do it.
I popped. I meant to do it before we started. I didn't. I'm sorry. So go ahead.
You better be sorry.
Right,
but Josh Downs is he was having probably the best camp out of any Colts receiver.
Agreed.
I even more so than Michael Pittman Jr. before.
And Pitt had a strong camp.
He did.
Downs was the best.
Exactly, and he was. You could find him down the field. He was making, of course, more shorter completions. He and Anthony Richardson had a rapport, a distinct rapport.
Remember they had that from the start. I remember talking to Downs. Was it rookie minicamp? When he said the night before the first practice, they're out there in the parking lot at the hotel running routes.
Mm-hmm. So
that's how you do it.
Let's just go out and practice a few.
Wing it, yep.
So he is not going to be back. He's not going to be back, but he's not going to be back either right now from the team. If we're leaning anyway, it's probably toward the no, like you said, because it would be on the very early side of a 4 to 6 week timetable recovery for this injury, which we'll see. We'll just see what happens. And the worst thing that could happen, like you said, would be to have him come back and then be gone for the next 2 months because you re-aggravate that injury. So, Chris Ballard stepping up to the microphone this week as the Colts get set for this 2024 season, and he did so after making the roster cut to 53, which of course is a tough thing to do year after year. And your first impressions for important things that came out from listening to Chris Ballard speak with us the other day, Mike.
Well, from the let's just start injury standpoint, the fact that they designated Samson Ebukam to return from an Achilles.
Yeah.
It would be 5.5 months. I don't know. It's been done. Cam Akers did it with the Rams Super Bowl 21, I think, after the 21 season. He was their leading rusher.
Yeah.
But, wow. The thing is, people shouldn't get too hot or bent out of shape because you get 8 recalls from IR, 2 of them in preseason, and man, if you're recalling 8 guys during the season from IR, you've had a tough year.
Right.
So that, and then, of course, Jelani Woods is done for the season. But after Chris went through he was asked about the young cornerbacks, where they got to play. He was asked about the offensive and defensive lines. He thinks it's the best group they've had here, period. Quarterback he talked about, it's going to be a roller coaster at times with the guy because he's played 17 starts since high school. And what needs to be mentioned is, if I'm not mistaken, he will be the youngest starting quarterback on opening day for the second year in a row. Mm-hmm. I mean, so this is a guy still growing into the position. I thought what most of us kind of clamped onto was when I think Kevin Bowen asked, do you consider yourself on the hot seat? And he sort of said, no, but then he said, yeah, that comes with position and you're always – under that. But then James Boyd asked a really good follow-up is, why going in this season 8 should people believe you're the right guy? And that's what it was sort of a lead into Chris Ballard sort of saying, to put it roughly, I'm going to do it my way, and if I get fired, I get fired. So people, there are things we don't agree with, how he does things. I wish they were more active in free agency. And think, cornerback, safety, whatever, or during March. But doggone, he's going to do it his way, and it either works or it doesn't. And if we want to look at the short and long-term fate or destiny of Chris Ballard, it is tied to number 5. If Anthony Richardson is the right guy, this will work. Mm-hmm. If he's not, it ain't going to work. So it was. You can get into the quotes more specifically, but it's basically it's my DNA. This is what I believe. Offensive line, defensive line. He did sort of joke that he's coming around to our dark side of getting receivers, which they've been spending draft capital on on wide receivers, second-round picks, and they just re-up Michael Pittman to pretty good money. So I thought it was interesting, but it's what we've heard from Chris Ballard before. People can believe it or not. They can beg him to do other things. This is who he is. He will sink and swim with his core principles running the show.
And you're right that he is stuck to his core principles. And I think we've touched on it, and I've touched on it for sure in some of our past podcasts about, like, he has the same approach really year after year, is focusing on the interior, on the offensive line and defensive line. And he says there was 1 or 2 years in there, you look back in 2021, where he felt like he didn't give the offensive line enough that year to make it through. And that's when they go into the year with Matt Pryor as your starting left tackle, with Danny Pinter as your starting right guard, and everything blows up because people are not living up to expectations. There's been times where he thinks he didn't give the defensive line enough firepower. But like, people get upset with Chris Ballard's efforts because similar problems pop up from year to year, but also similar strengths are there from year to year too. This team has been competitive in nearly every one of his seasons. Like the very first year, they're bad.
You almost throw it out.
Exactly, completely.
4-12.
Yeah, 2018, they're back in the playoffs.
Why?
Because luck.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yes. 2019.
Not good fortune, but
luck because of luck. Andrew Luck. 2019, even though Luck retires, they start out 5-2.
And they make the playoffs if
Jacoby Brissett stays healthy, is perhaps.
And if the kicker doesn't have his worst season of a Hall of Fame career.
Yes, both of those things.
But if Brissett doesn't get hurt against Pittsburgh?
Yes,
Pittsburgh. It was definitely Pittsburgh.
They make the play. They just make the playoffs.
Yep. 2020, that was a pretty good team that lost to another pretty good Buffalo team on the road in the playoffs that took them to the very final part of the game.
27-24.
Yep. And if Hot Rod had made a kick, then that would have been perhaps a different story. 2021, Chris Ballard has gone on record saying that was a good team, and it had a historic performance from a running back, but it also suffered from a historic failure from the leadership of that team down the stretch that collapsed completely.
You
can
blame the leadership wherever you want. There was a lot of blame to go around.
Completely. And that's all I'm going to say about that year.
It wasn't just the quarterback.
But it wasn't not the quarterback either. It wasn't just Kenny Moore allowing Hunter Renfrow and Marvin Jones to have career days over the last 2 weeks of the season. But it was part that, but it wasn't all that. If you bring up the quarterback, I feel like I need to bring up others because I know why people. I don't want to get into this. I don't want to get into this.
Is that the season they lose to the Raiders at home when Shaq jumps up for Derek Carr's fake and they complete the ball to Renfrow and all that stuff? Yeah. Right.
That's why I just wanted to say it was a failure of the leadership of that team.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole because there's dead carcasses all over the place.
Exactly, and we've talked about it.
And the next season's even better.
Oh yeah, 2022, and they convinced themselves that was. I think 2022 was Chris Ballard's greatest failure in his years as a GM because you talked yourself into Matt Ryan being basically a savior of the franchise.
That was collective. That wasn't just Chris. I think it was the owner. Said, let's get us a quarterback, and Frank, to some level, believe in it, and Ballard believe in it, and that's what desperate teams at a desperate position do.
To his credit, after the failure of 2022, and to the team's credit, they bounced back with something that was significant in 2023, which was leading a team again to the cusp of the playoffs with a backup quarterback. So Shane Steichen, coming in as head coach, led a team with a backup quarterback to the 10th best offense in the NFL in terms of points scored, and a defense that was probably 28th in the NFL, I think it was, in points allowed. So that there was good things and there were bad things from 2023. But after, like I said, the failure that was 2022, it was a significant step forward. So now 2024, big year, I think, for Chris Ballard, because does he take another step forward? Does it stay kind of meh at the same level? Do they go backward? Because like Ballard said, this is a roller coaster type quarterback. Like that's not a word that you really want to define your quarterback as. And that's what Chris Ballard attached to Anthony Richardson the other day.
Don't know.
But you're right. But he's right. That's the thing. He is right that you expect there to be big ups and big downs. And that's typically not the sign of playoff teams in the NFL, big ups and big downs. They have ups, but their downs are not big. They don't have big.
And that's the problem playing 4 games last year.
You're right.
These ups and downs were supposed to happen last year.
Right.
All supposed to be smoothed out during the course of his first professional season.
Jalen Hurts in Philly, year 2. That's what you want to see, and you just don't know.
No, you don't. And so that's where he is right now. And I understand why fans are upset. The team has not won a division for forever. The team has not won a playoff game in forever.
At Houston in 18, I think it was.
Yep, exactly. And then went to the Chiefs after that in Kansas City in a nasty weather situation. Did not couldn't win that one. But
where do you fall on how hot the hot seat is? Is this playoff or bust?
No, I don't think that's the case because of Richardson. Because I believe that the expectations in that building are that Richardson will provide some great highs and some very disappointing lows. And that, like I said, that is not typically a playoff team when your quarterback is playing that type of football. Like you typically get more consistent play from playoff quarterbacks. They're not the most. Right. Who knows what's going to come out of them every week? Exactly,
all over the place.
So that's why I would say no. The hot seat is not that hot on Chris Ballard. That if he doesn't make the playoffs or if he doesn't win a division, then he's out of here. I do think if it's another 4-13 season
with no injuries being
exactly right, with no injuries impacting anything, like that would be something. I even think that if Richardson gets knocked out again and it's a 4-13 season, he might be gone because the rest of his team, it's still the rest of his team right now.
And you have Flacco.
Exactly. And Flacco you would expect to be a capable quarterback in here. If everything goes south again and it's that or you're 5-12, like I think that would be the telltale sign of time to go. But other than that, if he's 8-9 and misses on the playoffs by 1 game, then no, you're going to have him. You're going to have him again.
And again, he is tied to the quarterback
completely.
His tenure here is tied to the quarterback, as most GMs are. Again, the fact that I like Chris. He's very personable. He works with the media. Maybe that buys him time. I don't know. I don't think that factors into Jim Irsay's assessment of the GM that, boy, the media really likes him. The Athletic put out a story today, I think it was, where they had talked to 31 agents, obviously anonymous, and when they ranked GMs, Ballard's top 5. Now, whether that's agents like to work with him or whatever, I don't know. He is considered a top 5, top 6 GM almost universally. Whoever's doing the ranking. But it's hard for me to imagine any other GM with his 6 years track record of how things were going having the opportunity to draft the quarterback of the future. Mm-hmm. Generally, you say, well, you had your chance for 6 years, but that just shows you Irsay's commitment. I don't know what the word is, devotion, belief, whatever it is in him. Remember, during the preseason game, blue chip GM.
Yeah. That raised my eyebrow a little bit because, like, I have a lot of respect for Chris Ballard, and I know people haggle with his methodology and all that stuff. But when you look at a blue chip GM, where's the Super Bowl championship? Yep. Where's the divisional championship? Where's getting to even the conference championship
game? Where are the playoff wins?
Right.
Like that, from a fan's perspective, how do you put a GM that has one playoff win in his 8-year tenure as a top 5 GM in the NFL? How do you do that?
Well, in 7 years, everybody in the divisions won at least 2 division titles.
Right.
Except these guys. So that's where it starts. And To me, this is not playoff or bust. I think they have to show a very definite upward arrow with the entire team, not just the quarterback, but they're going to ride the quarterback. But if the I think one thing Steichen's going to do, he understands. It's funny. I asked Shane Steichen today if people only watched your 3 playoff games, how much of your offense did you show? He said not much.
Did he smile when he said that?
Oh, yeah. It was like, you know.
Preseason games, of course.
Preseason
yes,
games.
You said playoff game.
I'm sorry.
Exactly. Just being specific.
Yeah,
yes. I knew what you meant.
Right. But he said not much, and he smiled because what we see against Houston is going to be so different from what we've seen so far. Now, we've seen glimpses in practice, training camp, because you do. But it so much is tied. I think Steichen's going to do a good job of maximizing what Richardson does, and as much as he can, not putting him in those bad situations, 3rd and 17, and you make a bad throw down the field. Richardson is going to make mistakes, but I think Steichen is going to do as much as he can to not expose him to those situations. But again, it goes back to Ballard. If the quarterback works, fine. If he gets hurt again after 4 games, at what point do you say this isn't going to work? I don't know. But I generally like the rosters he's put together. The haggling point over the years has been they've not gotten the quarterback right. They thought they had Phillip Rivers for 2 years. He had 1. They thought they had maybe a long-term in, I'll mention his name, Carson Wentz. And it didn't work. It didn't work. They couldn't get him out of the building fast enough, which he was so much more made of a scapegoat than there was more things there.
Thank you, Chap.
I know. I'm not going to go any further than
exactly,
that.
we're done.
I'm not. You're right. But I just think that if this is, like you said, a competitive season where they just fall short, and boy, if they hadn't done this, but you see the arrows going up, I think he's fine. And then next year is going to be the referendum season, because at some point it can't be more than a 2 or 3 year plan with a young quarterback, because after next season, Jonathan Taylor might be just about done here. Your talent around him, Ryan Kelly, they're getting older, and I think of all the years like Jacksonville had really good players, and they wasted their years. Maurice Jones-Drew, because you couldn't get quarterback right. So this year, I think, be competitive. Doggone it, you should be in December facing 4th and 1 with a chance of winning the division or getting a playoff berth. You should. And then next year should be the year where this is where you emerge. There has been no team that I think is more well-stocked to make some kind of a difference, more under the radar this year nationally than the Colts. Maybe that's a good thing for them.
Well, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say the AP had an article out today about the AFC South, and they talked about the big spending that the other teams have done in the division, and how they've got some stars that they've brought in, and Tennessee's remade their roster, and Jacksonville's made upgrades, and Houston, we know where they are and all that stuff. And they're just like, oh, and the Colts have Anthony Richardson, and they're going to finish last in the division.
Right.
And that's the national perception of this team, under the radar for sure.
So, yes, you can say that the Colts are under the radar. That's completely true. But it's because other teams have made more significant moves for the offseason, and that is why people get upset with Chris Ballard. That is why they look at this team and their quote-unquote top 5 GM, like you say, and they say, well, what's he done? What's he done for us?
And the only defense, and they don't need me to defend it, is they spent $150 million guaranteed on their own.
Right.
Would people's perception be better if they let Kenny and Grover and Taekwon and other guys leave, yet you sign Daniel Hunter and you sign Snead? Would the perception be better, even though your team might not be as good top to bottom? I don't know, but all I'd say is every time when people say that they didn't spend, just at least mention that they spent $250 million max contract, $150 million guaranteed in their own. So they did spend, just not elsewhere.
Not as noticeable when you're not bringing in, oh, hey, this guy's got a new jersey now.
Even though they made a strong push for Daniel Hunter. And they lost him.
Just a bit, yes.
So I realized that you took a swing and you missed, and they took a big swing, which to me was out of character in the draft. Trying to move to 6 to get who? I don't know. Receiver?
Maybe Malik Neighbors. Maybe Roma Dunze.
Brock Bowers?
Maybe not to 6 to get Brock Bowers,
there
but who
are a
knows?
couple local guys who were convinced if they'd gotten up to 6 that they would have taken Bowers.
And as much as they think Steichen can make a superstar out of a tight end, that's awful high for a tight end. What would Pitts go 3 to Atlanta a few years ago?
Yeah.
That's high, but I thought it'd been a receiver. But it just shows you that he did sort of veer a little bit outside of his lane with a couple moves. But by and large, again, I said it, Chris Ballard's gonna either rise or go down fighting his way.
Well, I'll say this before we really move on. The tight end, if it was Brock Bowers, we've seen tight ends make big differences here in Indy in the past. I mean, Eric Ebron most recently having a massive season with Andrew Luck. Before that, Dallas Clark obviously was part of a big monster of a team with, of course, Marvin and Reggie alongside. So he was just one of many options. But boy, he was a darn good one for a long time. So if you could, if that's what they envisioned from someone, then you go and make that deal and go get him. So
even in his news conference on yesterday, Ballard alluded to the fact that they tried some things, none of it really worked out. It's not they're sitting on their hands thinking, oh well, we won't do anything, we'll just go and re-sign all their guys. That was not necessarily option A, but when you go down, you look at your alternatives. That's kind of the way things shook out for the Colts this year.
All right, that's a good from the view of 100 miles up kind of view of the press conference. Let's take a look at kind of some of these specific discussion topics that he brought up. The most difficult position to make cuts this year, Ballard said, was the defensive line, and other teams agree because 2 different players that were cut by the Colts were claimed elsewhere. Jonah Laulu, their 7th-round pick out of Oklahoma, went to the Raiders, and Eric Johnson, the second, a 5th or 6th-round pick from 2 years ago, I believe it was cut and then signs with the New England Patriots.
Neither of which player would have been involved in this year's team.
No, they would not at all.
They would have probably been practice squad. Maybe Eric Johnson is the 10th guy. And he even mentioned that he indicated that people have been calling about getting one of his tackles.
He did, yes. That would be Blake Freeland or Matt Gonzalez.
I thought he was talking defensive. Was it off?
I thought that was offensive. It may have been okay. To that.
But he's like he said once. He said on his headstone it'll be offensive line, defensive line. Mm-hmm. That's where his basis is.
And they've got. We'll get to the roster breakdown, but they have 20 linemen between offensive defense on the 53 roster.
They do, for sure. And so those 2 guys just weren't going to be in the rotation because other players had been performing better, but they like those guys, and they obviously other teams like them too. You can only keep so many. The young secondary, maybe the biggest question mark on this team entering this year, the one that we've said since January, Chap, that that's probably the one place that you need to go out, or you would expect them to go out and make a move here and there, bring in a veteran, cornerback, safety, whatever it might be. Well,
Samuel Womack.
There you go. They brought in Samuel Womack. They claimed him off waivers. Yes. So at long last.
So shut up, would you?
Exactly.
Finally made the move.
The long expected move to add to the secondary from elsewhere, but they waived Darrell Baker Jr., who actually had a decent training camp. To be perfectly fair to him, with his last year was less than impressive, but he had a pretty good training camp in preseason. So anyway, what was I saying? Secondary. He said, they tried to do some things. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. And like you said earlier, Chap, kind of in your first introduction to Ballard, in order for these guys to prove what they can do, they have to play. In order for them to get better, they have to play, and that's what they're going to do. They're gonna play this year, and we're going to see exactly what Juju Brents and Jalen Jones, and to some extent Dallas Flowers as well, can do, because there's no other option right now.
There's safety, Rodney Thomas, Nick Cross.
Yep.
And in December, either he's going to be saying, I told you guys, let them play, and we're going to say, you should have brought somebody in. Mm-hmm. To me, there's no middle ground. It works or it doesn't. And I wish I had more confidence in this group, but until they prove it, it's just hard to. But outside of Kenny Moore, who do you put in Julian Blackmon? Who do you put your trust in that what you're going to get week after week after week?
I'll say this about Nick Cross, and Ballard alluded to it as well in his discussion of him being super young when they drafted him. He was 20 years old. And so this is his 3rd year. So he's 23 right now. And if it's true for Anthony Richardson being young and needing reps, it's true for Nick Cross too. He's young and he needs reps. Like, if you really believe in him, And they proved that they did by moving up and trading for him in the draft. They proved that they believe in him. Like, you need to throw him out there. You need to get him to play. He needs to be on the field. He needs to go through the ups and the downs. There's going to be, like Anthony Richardson probably with Nick Cross, the ups and the downs, the great plays, and the disappointing plays as well. And if you're playing free safety, the disappointing plays
you're going to see him.
Are really, really bad.
And they're going to cost you.
He's going to be chasing guys 50 yards down the field. Like, it is embarrassing for free safeties to go through those situations. Like, for quarterbacks, it can be embarrassing to throw the interception. That was the obvious play that you shouldn't have thrown. So you're gonna test his mentality. You're gonna test his decisiveness. You're gonna test his will. You're gonna test everything about him. But he needs to be out there and he needs to play, just like Anthony Richardson, the young guy that needs reps. The good things I think are going to be really good. The bad things are going to be really bad. And from both of those positions, Chap, like when bad things happen, it's not like middle linebacker where it can be erased by a good, strong safety.
Or it's a 5-yard gain.
Exactly.
Because you missed a tackle. Because Kwity Paye missed a tackle.
Right. The bad plays like give you makes so much worse of a thing happen than other positions could possibly have.
Left tackle. You whiff on a block and it's a blind side.
Everybody sees it. There goes the ball.
And it's a strip sack. So again, I come back to the same thing. You better be right. Mm-hmm. You can't have Nick Cross doing something when Juju Brents is chasing Nico Collins down the field.
But my point is, like, he needs to be there and he needs to make those mistakes. Like, if you really believe in him, he needs to be in there and play and make those mistakes. Because if you think he's going to be the answer next year, he needs to go through the bumps this year.
I guess the only argument I'd make, I'd like to have seen that he made these mistakes in year 1 and 2.
And that's the problem. He only started his first 2 games of his career.
First
and
two
then they
and
benched him.
two.
Then they benched him.
Until the last 2 games last year. Right.
Because they had to play him at that point.
Right. With Julian Blackmon out.
Right.
Correct. So, yeah, I understand that. And one of the complaints that people always used to have when they brought in Muhammad or somebody on the defensive line as an end, well, you're taking snaps away from whoever the young player was. Well,
Kwity Paye at the time or whatever,
right.
Yeah.
I understand that, but you earn – I understand they need to play. I understand they need to learn. But if I'm 50 other players on the roster and I see that they're letting this guy learn and make mistakes and it's costing you games, that's the difficult part is I wish there was a better way. The way they've watered down preseason, you can't do it, is how you get that the live for real stuff when it's not going to cost you a game like occasionally it's going to. Occasionally it might.
Chris Ballard kept Sam Ehlinger on the roster this year, and there was kind of a change in the expected rules.
Yeah,
right
really
before.
late too, on cut day, right?
Well, apparently they said the memo came out in August, and maybe people didn't see it.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It was one of those innocuous things, well, personnel update or something, and it was a pretty big deal.
Oh, by the way,
Right.
by the way, was that we expected this year the NFL teams to be able to.
The owners approved it.
The owners approved it to make a third quarterback on the practice squad, basically game day eligible, and so you can keep him on the practice squad. It doesn't count against the 53-man roster. The NFLPA vetoed that. And now it's not possible for teams. You may be asking yourself, well, why did the NFLPA veto that? Well, it's a little complicated, but as always, it comes down to money. Exactly. And if a player is not on the 53-man roster, he is not paid a 53-man roster type sum. Chap, I think you kind of broke down some things in a recent article.
$44,000
a week,
a rookie minimum on the active roster.
$44,000 minimum.
Right. And the practice squad, it goes from like 12-8 to 23.
Yeah, I think that's
depending
what I
on
read
your
today.
experience. It matters.
So you're paid a third. I mean, $12,000 a week is nothing to sneeze at.
Right.
But it's still not 44.
44,000 is more.
Exactly.
I went to Ball State, but I understand that. And then too, they didn't want teams stashing players on the practice squad. Mm-hmm. But what makes no sense though is you can elevate 2 guys on game day. It can be a kicker, it can be a defensive end, it can be a receiver. It can't be a quarterback. What's that got to do? Why?
That's weird.
That makes no sense.
Teams are stashing guys on the practice squad anyway because of the flexibility that it gives them.
Right. So, and from what Ballard said, I think had that rule been in place, the quarterback can be on the third quarterback can be on the practice squad. That's what they would have done with Sam, I thought, from what he said. And then when they couldn't, they were not going to risk. Well, I don't know what they would have done. I guess they would have brought him back to the practice squad, which all that means is you can bring him up like 3 times.
Right.
Because if there is a limit, and then you have to do it during the week.
Right.
You've got to make the move during the week. It's got to be the third quarterback has got to be on the active roster. So it just makes not a lot of sense. But the end result is they kept 3 quarterbacks, Sam being the third.
And then also Jason Bean is on the practice squad as well to try to
That's a good thing.
To develop him as well.
I want to
he was
see
cool.
that. He's got some things to develop.
Yep.
He's not ready yet, but maybe he will be.
I like fun players, and he was a fun player. Let's see what he can do. Yeah, I am a fan of having fun, and he was fun, so I'm glad that he's here. The Colts put in a waiver claim and were awarded defensive back Samuel Womack from San Francisco, and they waived Darryl Baker in response to that. So Chris Ballard said the team liked Womack. He was in the 2022 draft. He was a 5th rounder. Actually, he was taken about 5 or 10 picks before they took Eric Johnson that year, who was coincidentally released from the team this year. So would they have still taken Johnson if Womack was available? You know, who knows at that point? Ballard would certainly not answer that question, but Ballard said that they liked Womack back in 22. So now we get to see if he plays at all. As of right now, I would certainly slot him behind everyone at cornerback.
Well, but he's probably the backup nickel.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the
He's
thing.
backup nickel to Kenny. And
Somebody has to be. Nobody else is. Yeah.
I thought of all the moves they made, and this is down the road, I'm surprised they didn't or haven't brought Micah Abrahams back to the practice squad. Mm-hmm. They must have really just decided that they missed on him. Mm-hmm. With the size, because he was, he made the big play.
He did the strip,
which is funny because that's 2 years in a row that a draft pick on the defensive backfield has made a play in preseason,
has scored a touchdown,
and been let go. So, but no, I think that Womack is a backup nickel because they brought Chris Lamons back to the practice squad.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But this is also a special teams guy.
Yeah.
Right.
And
a lot of special team snaps.
Right.
Okay. No concerns about Matt Gay, according to Chris Ballard. Said there was more to the story in his 2023 fade.
I wish he would have elaborated more.
Exactly, I do too.
And they asked for a follow-up, and he didn't really. He just kind of deflected.
Well, but he mentioned, there was people forget those 5 kicks in Baltimore and the 450 yards, but there was more. And again, if I remember right, Matt Gay and his wife, she delivered a child in December.
Yes.
But also 1 day or 1 week last year, I think it was the Atlanta week, he's on the injury report with a hip injury. So I don't know. It just the way he mentioned it made it sound like, well, you guys don't know the whole story. There was more involved to his late season where he didn't kick well, and he didn't kick well again in the preseason. But
right.
I tell you,
this needs to be a results-oriented business right here, and if you don't make the kicks, then there's no reason to have you on the team, to be perfectly honest. And the Colts did sign Spencer Schrader, their kicker, to the practice squad, the other guy they had in the preseason, who looked pretty good, the rookie out of Notre Dame. Hit some 50-plus yard field goals. Looked just fine. So congrats to Spencer for making a practice squad. Chris admitted it's a long shot for Samson Ebukam to get back. Chap, you touched on that. No need to get into that too much. The other player they designated to return from the preseason from injury on IR was Cam McGrone.
You remember the injury?
The Lawrence Central product. I do not remember the injury, no. But they said that he'll likely be available at some point as just a backup there in the they only had right now 5 linebackers,
right,
which is not a lot of linebackers, but not a lot of play at the time. So you don't need too many linebackers. Jelani Woods, not an option to return. Ballard said, it sucks. It sucks.
Saw Jelani in the locker room today. He had a boot on his left foot.
Turf toe.
And didn't get a chance to talk to him, but, that's 2 years in a row that injuries have taken away a player that you really thought was going to be a component of your offense.
Absolutely brutal. But the thing is, this year, I didn't expect him to do anything, because he couldn't get up past 4th on the depth chart, or 5th on the depth chart. He was never more than just with the 3rd team consistently.
We were talking in the press room today or yesterday, and I'm as guilty as anyone as overestimating the tight end position going into camp. People were talking, boy, maybe they'll keep 5 of these guys. I could argue they should have kept 3 from what we saw during training camp. They wouldn't do that because of the way they use them. But outside of Mo and Kylan Granson, it's just been yeah, really. And that's not what you want, because, again, Steichen is a master at using tight ends. I think Granson's going to have a numbers a decent numbers season because
Yeah.
and Mo's going to give him 20 catches and 3 touchdowns, and he's going to block the snot out of people. So, but that's why I in a quiet moment, I'd love to have Ballard tell us if Bowers might have been that guy at 6. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm. Maybe get 1 or 2 drinks in him sometime and see what he can divulge. But I agree with you that Kylan Granson could have some numbers this year, especially early until Josh Downs is back.
Correct.
But also, I think something that went into what you said earlier, trying to not make it too difficult on Richardson.
Security blanket type player.
If you're in 2nd and 9 because Jonathan Taylor's first down run just gave you a yard, you want to get a couple yards and make 3rd down manageable. You really want to do that for your young quarterback.
Jack Doyle,
exactly.
Where are you?
Yes, so that's Kylan Granson could become that and have a 50 catch
He's
for
got more
430
He's got
yards.
more run after the catch than Jack did.
He does.
But that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
A move the chains guy.
And he doesn't block like Jack does. Not too many guys do block like Jack does, to be fair. That's not anything against Kylan. That's a credit to what Doyle was doing here for years. He gave him 3 different contracts as an undrafted rookie. He made $40 million in his career. Go Cathedral Fighting Irish. Let's see, where are we on this list here? Thinks the Colts will be in the mix in the AFC South in the playoffs. That depends completely on how high the highs are and how low the lows are with Anthony Richardson, in my opinion. We've kind of got into that already. Let's see. Richardson, he thinks he'll do a better job protecting himself. He'd better do a better job of protecting himself. That's period. And not much to analyze about that. Says Laiatu Latu is going to play a lot and can do some pretty special things. He's got some pretty freaky instincts. And that'll be interesting to see exactly how much Latu plays. He's not going to start right away. That's going to be Tyquan Lewis's job. But will this be a Dwight Freeney type scenario where halfway through the season, Chap, you just can't leave him on the bench? That's obviously what Latu's goal has to be, is just prove that he needs to be in there because of what he does when he is in there.
It's a story I'm working on for early next week. When I've talked to Dwight Freeney, I talked to Tony Dungy about what was the plan in 2002, and it was to do exactly what the Colts are doing now. They knew Freeney was possibly a special pass rusher, and there were red flags with Latu with health, and there were red flags with Freeney for size. Mm-hmm. But Dungy said at the time, we had planned on play indoors with the noise. If you get the lead, you turn that guy loose. Freeney came off the bench. Dungy said he thought maybe 30% of the snaps the first 8 games. I think he had 4 sacks in those games. He starts in Philadelphia and he goes bonkers. A sack and 3 forced fumbles. He has 9 sacks over the last, 8 or 7 games. Mm-hmm. And Dungy said if we start him earlier, he's Defensive Rookie of the Year, not Julius Peppers.
Yep.
So I really think they're going to use Latu virtually the same way. I've mentioned quality over quantity. You're going to see impact numbers with fewer snaps. I bet, barring injuries, Tyquan Lewis may play more snaps this year.
Possible, yes.
Than Latu. So they're going to get this kid in advantageous pass rush positions. And if the other guys matched last year and take Ebukam out of the mix, but Buck's going to get 8 sacks because he always gets 8 sacks. But if Quiddy's up there doing things and Tyquan and Dio, then somebody's going to get single blocked. And maybe a double block Buck and you double block.
You can't single block Grover. You can't do it.
Right. So I think it's going to really be interesting to see how they do it. But this could very easily mirror what they did with Freeney. I think he set the rookie record. He set the team record with 13 sacks.
Yeah.
So if they can get similar progression from Latu as they did Freeney, then they'll be home sweet with him.
That would be ideal. Reggie Wayne was complimented by Chris Ballard for his work with Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell. Pierce had a pretty good preseason training camp.
Very good preseason. A better one than Mitchell did.
Yep, for sure. And that's stuff I don't want to take anything away from Mitchell because I thought he had a fine preseason as a rookie, as a guy that they love so much they traded back to get. So Pierce,
got to bring that up just because
every time until he proves that I can't say it anymore. That's how I feel about it.
How many spots was it? Was it 4?
I forget exactly how many, but it was 4 or 5.
10 guys taken before you. Yeah,
they did it for Alec Pierce too. To be fair, so I'll bring it up again for Pierce. They loved him so much they traded back to get him. So both of these wide receivers they loved so much they moved back in the draft to get. So we'll see if either of them can shed that moniker from me this year.
They traded up to get JT, right?
They traded up to get JT. Yes, they did.
Worked.
So yes, that one worked pretty darn well. No doubt about it. Let's see. He said he likes his fronts. You believe in something or you don't. That's him. You believe in something or you don't. Roster cut down. The Colts have their 53-man roster. We can break away a little bit from it. A few surprises on this list, possibly. Only 3 running backs, especially chap with Trey Sermon, one of those running backs who is not playing here to start the season.
He's practicing. I think he practiced today.
Okay, that's good.
So
progressing well, trending in the right direction.
Well, and one thing people need to keep in mind with the way the rules are with practice squad, they bring guys up.
Yeah, they can elevate guys.
They do it, and I realize there's a limit on, I think it's 3. It's either
per
3.
Week?
Is it?
Yeah.
No, it's 2 on game day.
Okay.
But I think there's a limit on how many times you can bring a guy up.
Right.
And I think it is 3 times.
Is it 3 total or 3 in a row?
I think it's 3 total
I
because
thought it was
then you
3
have to
total.
make him.
Because then he's got to be active or you let him go.
Right.
So, for the first part of the season, you've got Evan Hall. He's back on the practice squad, right?
He's on the practice squad. Yes, they signed him to the practice squad.
When the week comes, if all 3 of your guys are healthy, then you don't worry about it. If one of your guys is dinged up, then you bring Evan Hall up. Mm-hmm. To me, the practice squad gives you a lot of flexibility, and few teams massage the practice squad the way the Colts do. They use it, and that's why if you're practicing during the week, you better be paying attention because you might be on Saturday be told you're going to play this week, so you better be ready. They do a good job with that.
Yep. Ronnie Harrison Jr. also let go. He was one of the first players to be let go at safety. So that
surprised you?
It didn't surprise me, like the move itself. It's just he had played so much.
That's what surprised me.
Right.
And he'd worked with the first team here and there and stuff. So that's not super surprising.
Maybe they saw what they needed to see when he was up with the first unit.
Very much so. And then he also doesn't really play special teams. And I know that they kept Denbo, and I think a big reason they kept Denbo is because he's one of their special teams guys.
I think that they cut Ronnie Harrison Jr. Like they had him here just in case they wanted to give up on Nick Cross completely after this offseason. Like I think that's why he was here. And so they don't want to give up Cross. So in spite of how much they let Harrison play, he's gone now. That's kind of how I feel about it.
And in the cruel part of the NFL, if they need Ronnie Harrison in 4 weeks, he's probably out there, right?
He might be available.
Could be.
Yeah.
Nobody was picking him up last year. The Colts
Right.
picked him up to make him play linebacker for crying out
Right.
loud.
So-
And I know they played him at safety, but he'd also been a linebacker. They'd been trying to,
Yeah.
And
It's not like they cut Ronnie Lott here. They cut
Right.
Ronnie Harrison.
right. And they may have had him around too to see, hey, just in case Carlisle's, doesn't work out
Yep.
as that linebacker position. Who knows?
So, you mentioned Trevor Denbo, and I tweeted this out. Chap retweeted me, of course, and but it's
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're with your 55,000 your legion of followers, or however exactly many it is, maybe more than that by now. But my point with Trevor Denbo making this roster, he's a name that, of course, we don't talk about at all. But he is a special teams lock now. Like you cannot make a 53-man roster without Trevor Denbo on this team
Or
right
Ashton
now.
Doolin.
Or Ashton Doolin or Grant Stewart. Those 3 guys
There you go.
are
There
your
you go.
3. Like if you sit down and your coaches and your GM and all the Colts decision makers are at a table, you look over at Brian Cox, the special teams coordinator.
Brian
Mason.
Brian
Mason.
Say, you get your three exemptions. Who you want?
Yes.
He'll give you those 3.
Yeah, those are the 3 guys right there. And Denbo has now made this roster 3 or 4 years in a row.
And there is nothing wrong with that.
Nope. Absolutely not.
Go back and look at how Zaire Franklin made his last 2 big contracts.
Yep.
Special teams.
Denbo has proven to be worthwhile on special teams. Like he's a good open field tackler. He's tough. He is in on a lot of plays. You'll see his number in there on special teams plays quite a bit. So that's why he's on the team, not because of anything you expect him to do.
If he hasn't played significant snaps on defense, then you've had injuries.
It's trouble, yes.
And that's just a fact of life.
Mm-hmm. That's like George Odom a couple years ago.
Right.
Like you'd have
All he
injuries.
did was make the Pro Bowl.
Exactly. He's pretty good on special teams.
He's still playing.
Yep, and he's down in San Francisco. He moved because he wanted a chance to try to be
Right.
more of a every down type safety. So he wanted to get out of Indy, felt like he was maybe typecast a little bit here. But he went somewhere else, and they have not made him their starter either in San Francisco, who's has, to be fair, one of the best defenses in the NFL. So like he's still a very good special teams player. He has a skill.
Still a special teams monster.
A skill that hundreds, if not thousands of players who are cut on This Week, year after year in the NFL, would love to have so that they could make a 53-man roster. So props to Trevor Denbo there. And also Ashton Dulin and Grant Stewart as well.
I remember back in the day with Zach Pascal.
Yep.
Where
Yep.
he was always your last receiver. He was a great special team player, and because of injuries, he was always your third receiver.
Exactly.
Old reliable Zach Pascal.
There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what you don't want to see. But that's why you keep your head down, your work. And I mentioned Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed. Mm-hmm. When you're those late round picks or undrafted guys, make a difference. And again, Stewart's a guy that all you do is if there's a special teams play, you look and see if there's hair coming out of the back of the helmet,
and there usually
is.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. A couple players who are drafted players did not make the cut. Like we said, Jonah Luulu, one of them who was picked up elsewhere. Also, cornerbacks Jalen Simpson.
Where did he go? Was it New England or Vegas?
Luulu went to Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Johnson went to New England.
Right. Jalen Simpson, Micah Abraham, the two corners that did not make the cut on this roster. Dalton Tucker, the one undrafted free agent to make the list at offensive lineman, as part of one of 10 offensive linemen on this Colts roster. 10 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen, 20 of the 53 on the inside. Like Chris Ballard says, he builds from the trenches, and they liked what Tucker could do there. So there he is.
The one question that Ballard really didn't answer to ease anyone's concerns, I don't think. I asked him about his approach with the swing tackle, offensive tackle. Because Blake Friedland really didn't have a good camp. And I think from what we got from Ballard is that they found out that Friedland is probably a right tackle.
Right. That's what it sounded like to me.
Right. That some of his mechanics and all that, the fundamentals were just not there at left tackle, which is going to give the rookie, you can mention his name because
Matt Gonzalez.
See, I'll butcher even.
Pronounced exactly like it's spelled.
Right.
Again.
So is he your backup tackle? And, linemen get hurt. That 1 year, 4 or 5 years ago, where the Colts had everybody start every game, it doesn't happen very much.
No, yeah.
But Ryman missed 2 games last year. Was it a concussion? Maybe.
Might have been.
I think.
I don't remember.
And Braden misses, half a dozen.
Yeah, he had the knee.
Or more with the knee. So they're going to play. I think they feel really, really good about their interior depth. They did keep chirp Danny Penner.
Let's go.
So I as long as he's in the roster, we need to, pound that out. But I think they like their interior backup. We'll see about the outside guys.
Let's see. 2023 draft pick Jake Witt was cut and retired from football. Had a practice squad invitation. Allegedly had a couple practice squad invitations. I saw somebody report. I wish I knew exactly who that was. I would credit them personally, but somebody tweeted that he had a couple practice squad invitations.
Well, he mentioned that in his Instagram or
There you go.
Facebook post.
There you go. Thank you, chap.
But he just decided that,
it's time to hang it up. That's okay.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, if you play it for your again, and then this is a guy that last year had his entire rookie year was coming back from the injury that you're
right.
And this year he just wasn't invested enough to do it, which is fine.
Titus Leo waived. Evan Hall waived. A couple other draft picks there, like we said. Yeah, so those are some of the draft picks that did not make the 53-man roster. We've talked a little bit about practice squad. Here's the players as of Wednesday. They had defensive end Jannard Avery, who played a little bit here and there and got called up a couple games. Jason Bean, a quarterback, like we mentioned. Evan Hall, running back. Wide receiver DJ Montgomery. Cornerbacks Chris Lamons, Jalen Simpson, Amir Speed. Wide receiver Laquan Treadwell. Linebacker Austin Ajake. Linebacker Liam Anderson. And safety Marcel Dabo, who's part of the NFL's. They have some kind of overseas outreach program.
Is this the last year for the exemption?
It might be. So,
I was wondering whether the Colts had 16 or 17 practice squad players.
Because he's an exempt player.
Correct.
Yeah, so he can be on there for free.
International Pathway or whatever.
Yes.
I forget what the program's called.
Yes. Signed kicker Spencer Schrader Thursday. Also signed defensive tackle McTelvin Agim to the practice squad. Apologies if I can't get his name.
Still got a few more spots, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
2 or 3.
You know they can't get on their practice squad is Carson Steele, running back, ferocious 2020 Indiana Mr. Football out of Center Grove. You know why? Because he performed so darn well for Kansas City, the Super Bowl champions in the preseason, that they had to keep him on the 53-man roster. Andy Reid loves him some Carson Steele. Let's go chirp chirp.
That video that's out there, I don't know what game it was in the preseason, where he just runs through people.
I think it was against the Bears, 31-yard run. He stiff-armed a guy, ran over another one.
I can still remember during the local pro day, at the Colts complex before the draft. He was the guy we talked to and did a story on him.
Yep.
And he's a great kid.
Love Carson.
Was it from Ball State to UCLA?
UCLA, that's right.
And was successful at both spots. Good for him. You just love to see these local kids really do the due diligence, do what it takes, and then they find. All you have to do is get your foot in the door.
Yep, that's it.
If you can play, they will find you.
Mm-hmm. And he can play.
So he made the roster for the defending Super Bowl champions.
How about that?
I mean, that's
At a prime position.
yeah, as an undrafted
running back,
free agent.
for crying out loud. Yes.
No, he's not their seventh, defensive lineman or whatever. He's a player that, has a chance of doing something, probably special teams and all that. So good for him. Good for him.
The Colts will take on the Houston Texans in Week 1 of the 2024 NFL season, Sunday, September 8th at 1 p.m., broadcast here in Central Indiana on CBS 4, and you can watch our Blue Zone pregame show at 11:30 that Sunday morning, also on CBS 4.
Early prediction.
Texan 31-28.
I'm going good guys in an early upset.
All right.
Just because I what it can do for the team one way or the other. So I am very curious.
I'm going to play Homer here, and I'm going to go 28-24. Colts get off the schneid.
You're just a hater.
I'm terrible. With how good an Anthony Richardson led team looked against Houston last year, I certainly wouldn't put it past Shane Steichen to have a couple good calls up his sleeve.
It's a really, really good
against
Houston team.
D'Amico Ryan's
it should
defense.
be a good Houston team, so it should be a good game.
I think it's going to be a really tight game. I do not
We're going to see how really strong this defensive line is.
Yep.
They got to get in.
They got to get after Stroud.
In Stroud's kitchen from the first snap.
I mean, shoot, they've got. Do they have Stephon Diggs, right? Or they have Diggs, they have Tank Dell,
Nico Collins.
John Michie, Nico Collins. I mean, geez, just weapons out to wazoo. Joe Mixon is there.
It's hard to complete passes from your backside.
Exactly. That's your hope. That's going to be your strength.
And they got after him in that first game.
We'll talk about that plenty next week. Chav, you brought God, I'm trying to wrap things up.
What are we going to talk about next week?
Exactly. It's all gone. There's no content anymore. Oh no. We'll get into matchups and all that next week between the Colts and the Texans. But for now, for Mike and Matt, I'm Dave. Appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone Podcast.